issue. Ty, you've obviously listened to all the speakers. Would you like to add any observations as to any other threats you're seeing in the IT industry, and how do we build a security mindset without getting paranoid or paralysed with fear?
Yeah, sure. One of the things I noticed watching the presentations was that a lot of the conversations were around the massive amount of evolving IT and how things are going to change massively over the next 5 years, and they have done over the last 15 years. You know, if you look back from a security or a threat point of view over the last 15 years, you go back to you know, the days of Windows 2000. Sure, it's absolutely horribly insecure, and penetration testers absolutely loved it. But you know, all of our systems were hosted in data centers. We had phones with buttons, you know, and a lot of the attacks that we were seeing back then were directly against infrastructure connected to the internet, rather than sort of the client-side exploits that we're seeing these days. So as technology sort of evolved, and you can also look at this from the point of view of open source. Back 15 years ago, it was actually still, it was quite mature. But if you look back over the last 15 years at how much open source technology has evolved, and you apply that to the threat landscape, it's all of that open source technology can now be used by script kiddies to create massively complex malware and exploits to, you know, have large amounts of encryption to bypass things like antivirus and IPS and those sort of things. When you start looking at sort of the evolution away from data centers to the cloud, I'll probably ruffle a few feathers on the panel with this one in terms of cloud being secure, in the sense that not necessarily when you're looking at places like Google or, you know, the big players in that space. You know, I think that they can do a hell of a lot of a better job in security than a lot of us would. But when you start looking at cloud from the sense of it's an enabler for you know, small businesses, for example, to create massively scalable applications that were only previously available to, you know, the likes of the IBMs and those sort of places. They're building these things without security budgets because they're startups. And there's massive amounts of startups out there who are just exponentially expanding the technology that we're using and putting it out on the internet without any security budgets and without any security controls in place. And we see this every single day, and we're breaking into these systems every single day. And these are all cloud-based applications. So really what I think the biggest threat is when you ask that is really us, in the sense that we're not taking the rules that, or the lessons that we learned over the last 15 years and applying them to what we've got today. So when a lot of places move to cloud-based architectures or start putting their data into some of these SaaS-based solutions, they're not taking into account the lessons that we've learned in the past, and that's going to lead to massive security breaches moving forward. And that's not, so coming to your next point, which was how do we move forward without being paranoid. I don't think that, well, there's the whole thing of just because you're paranoid, it doesn't mean they're not out to get you. And I don't think that we're actually being paranoid just because we're fearful of being hacked. I think it's realistic. And it's more about, you know, not being paralyzed moving forward by that. It's more just about making sure that you're prioritizing security alongside functionality as we start delivering these services moving forward to make sure that we don't suffer security breaches.
What's the best area for a new web developer to start these days?
Look, I mean, these days, obviously I'll take the security angle on this, but you know, we've all seen the big shift away from you know, the waterfall style development approach to your agile development approach. I think that obviously that's the way that things are going forward, especially with, you know, the whole agile sort of cloud thing that's been going on. But also, I think that really the benefit that, or the differentiator that a lot of developers will have is integrating security into that. Because it's highly valuable for organizations to have a security developer rather than just a developer that can punch out functionality, but also leave holes in their software.
If you were to time travel and the same panel is being brought back for celebration of 75th birthday of ACS, how do you say, can you visualize what it will be? And like classic thing is, now computer being in everything, does that mean the qualification of being an ACS member becomes for everyone because they all work with computers?
It actually scares me, to be honest, because, you know, the way that, as I said before, the absolute speed that technology is just advancing towards, and also the way that that's moving towards integrating into things like cars and pacemakers and everything that's starting to become integrated with physical security and really safety, you know, I think is just going to become a big target. And, you know, instead of just losing data, you start losing lives. So from that point of view, it's a pretty serious concern. Just the way that sort of the number of vulnerabilities that we see every day in software all over the place, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better, to be honest. And, you know, as you start dealing with things like new technologies, you tend to see that initially they're introduced with next to no security, and then it starts getting tacked on later on. That may be because of limitations within the power of the devices, you know, those sort of things. So, you know, there's the big buzzword around the Internet of Things, and a lot of the security around those are pretty minimal because the batteries don't last very long if you put high levels of encryption on them. So you start to, I think it's concerning, yeah, sort of moving forward around what we're going to have to face when just everything is digitized and we're hooked up to it.
Currently, Google reads my emails. I don't know if I gave it permission, but I'll presume so. It sees that I've got a booking for a flight overseas. And on the day, it will send me a notification on my Android phone advising me what time I need to leave from my home to get to the airport in time, with a one click to give me the map and the route directions. It then comes back and gives me another notification to say my flight has been delayed by 2 hours and updates my time to leave based on current traffic. It does all this before the airlines even told me that the flight has been delayed. In fact, I got to the desk before they actually found out that it had been delayed. Obviously, we're getting a lot of data that is being connected into systems that has nothing to do with what the people have to do, right? I didn't engage, I didn't ask for that information, it just did it. We're talking about how to connect people to the ongoing technological change. As we bring in more Internet of Things, that data is just going to increase phenomenally. So I guess my question is this, is technically, in the military, it used to be at a time that everyone knew how to fight, everyone knew how to fire a gun. But government decided, now that could be dangerous. We better just have a military army and separate it and only let certain people do those activities. As all this data comes in there and it becomes more critical to our ongoing lifestyle, are we not more likely to have people actually dumbing down and not knowing anything about computers, and that the government will regulate and say there are a certain number of people that will be allowed to open up a computer or to be allowed to write a piece of software to overcome the risk of security and to protect our borders and national economy?
I mean, in terms of your Google, whether you ticked in or not, When they first released Google Drive, I remember a printed news article with some of the terms and conditions of that, which basically said, we can do whatever we want with your data. Literally, something along those lines. So yeah, you probably opted in. From the point of view of isolating people from, computers, I think if we abstract it up a bit, what is a computer moving down the line, as we start talking about Internet of Things or automated cars or, everything's going to be abstracted out away from just your laptop, right? The other side of it is obviously big data analytics, which is where everyone's going these days, including security. So the whole cyber threat intelligence industry is based on big data, basically. And the fact that, sorry if there's any antivirus vendors in the room, but they've been absolutely horrible for the last 20 years. And everyone suddenly realized this and turned to big data to say, well, actually, if we can't trust our detection controls, then how do we actually try and predict threats and shut them down rather than cleaning up security breaches? So I think you can look at that from the security perspective, and then you can also look at it from an attacker's perspective of using all of this data. How can I actually break into different organisations and governments and things like that? So I think that's probably another risk that you can throw on top of that.
Thank you.